Welcome to Fear Forge. Tonight, I'll be sharing one disturbing story. It's called The Curse of Blackwood Forest. Turn down the lights and let's begin. I don't keep plants in my flat anymore. No ferns, no succulents, not even a vase of flowers on the table. My friends think it's a bachelor thing, that I'm just too lazy to water them. But that's not it. I can't stand the smell. That specific, earthy smell of wet soil and photosynthesis. To most people, it smells like life. To me, it smells like him. Or it. I'm recording this because I saw a news report this morning. A missing persons case. A young couple, hikers, vanished near the village of Little Hangleton on the Welsh border. The police are calling it a tragic accident, suspecting they fell into a ravine. But I know where they went. And I know they didn't fall. They were taken, just like I almost was. If you're listening to this and you enjoy those off-the-beaten-track camping trips, do yourself a favor. Stick to the path. And if the woods go quiet, run. This happened 3 years ago. I'd just come out of a messy divorce and needed to get out of London. I wanted silence. I wanted isolation. I found a listing for a property in Herefordshire, right on the edge of the Blackwood Forest. The locals call it the Blackwood for a reason. It's a dense, ancient stretch of woodland, oaks and yews that date back to the Doomsday Book. The canopy is so thick that even at high noon, the forest floor is bathed in a permanent, gloomy twilight. The cottage I rented was an old gamekeeper's lodge. It was stone-built, cold, and sat right on the boundary line. My back garden didn't have a fence. The lawn just sort of gave up and the forest took over. I remember the first night I arrived. It was November. The air was crisp and smelled of wood smoke. I stood on the back porch with a cup of tea, looking into the trees. It was incredibly quiet. No traffic, no sirens. Just the wind rushing through the upper branches. It sounded like the ocean. But looking back, I realized I wasn't listening closely enough. If I had been, I would have noticed that there were no owls hooting, no foxes screaming, just emptiness. The forest was holding its breath. The first week was peaceful enough, mostly. I spent my days painting the skirting boards and chopping logs for the burner. But then, the small things started happening. It began with the boundaries. I'd laid a row of white stones along the edge of the grass, just to mark where my garden ended and the woods began. One morning, I went out with my coffee and saw that the stones had been moved. They weren't scattered, like a badger had rooted through them. They had been pushed inward, about a foot closer to the house. I laughed it off. Foxes, I told myself, or maybe the local kids messing with the new townie. But the next morning they had moved again, another foot closer. It was as if the forest was creeping forward, inch by inch, reclaiming the land. Then came the gifts. I woke up on a Tuesday to find something sitting on my back doorstep. It was a rabbit, dead obviously, but it hadn't been killed by a predator. There was no blood, no bite marks. The rabbit had been twisted. Its legs were braided together with ivy, intricate knots woven tight against the bone, and its mouth was stuffed full of hawthorn berries. It looked ceremonial. I kicked it into the bushes with my boot and went inside, locking the door behind me. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. That sensation of being watched. You know the one, when you're alone in a room, but the hairs on your arms stand up. I looked out the kitchen window toward the tree line. The mist was rolling in, gray and cloying. And for a second, just a split second, I thought I saw a shape standing between two massive oak trees. Tall, too tall to be a man. And then the mist swallowed it. I decided to go into the village that evening. I needed a pint and, frankly, I needed to see other human beings. The local pub, the Drover's Arms, was one of those places with low beams and a fire that looked like it had been burning since the 1800s. I sat at the bar and ordered a stout. The landlord was a heavy-set man, wiping a glass with a rag that looked greasier than the floor. "Settling in all right up at the lodge?" he asked. He didn't look at me. "Yeah, fine," I lied. "Bit quiet." "Quiet is good," he grunted. "As long as it stays quiet." I took a sip of my drink. "I found a dead rabbit on my step today. Looked like Well, looked like someone had messed with it. Woven vines around it. The pub went silent. I'm not exaggerating. The murmur of conversation just cut out. The landlord stopped wiping the glass. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were hard. "Don't touch the offerings, son," he said, his voice low. "Offerings?" I asked. "To who?" He leaned in close. "The Blackwood isn't like other woods. The roots go deep, deep into things that should have stayed buried. If you find a gift, you leave it. You acknowledge it. And you lock your bloody doors at sundown." He wouldn't say another word. The locals turned their backs to me. I finished my drink quickly and left. The drive back was terrifying. The headlights of my car cut through the tunnel of trees, casting long, dancing shadows. Every branch looked like a claw reaching for the bonnet. When I got back to the cottage, the silence was deafening. I locked the front door. I locked the back door. I bolted the windows. I sat in the living room trying to read, but the house felt fragile. The stone walls felt like paper against the weight of the forest outside. Then, around 2 a.m., I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the window on the second floor. I froze. There was no balcony, no ladder, just a sheer drop to the patio below. Tap, scrape. It sounded like a fingernail dragging down the glass. I grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace and crept up the stairs. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached the landing and looked at the bedroom window. There was nothing there, just the black reflection of the room. But then I saw the glass. It was wet. On the outside, there was a smear of something thick and green. Slime. And embedded in the slime was a single black crow feather. The next day, I planned to leave. I was going to pack my bags and head back to London. I didn't care about the deposit. I was throwing clothes into a suitcase when the power went out. The cottage plunged into gray gloom. I went to the utility cupboard to check the fuse box, but the fuses were fine. The line must have been down. I walked to the back door to look at the telegraph pole in the garden. And that's when I saw it. The forest hadn't just crept closer. It had arrived. Overnight, thick, gnarled roots had burst up through the patio stones. They were pulsing, almost like veins, throbbing with a dark, sap-like fluid. They were wrapping around the base of the cottage, climbing the stonework. And standing at the edge of the lawn, right where the woods began, was the figure. It wasn't a man. I saw that clearly now. It was roughly humanoid, standing about 7 feet tall. But its skin was bark, gray, cracked, weeping elm bark. Its limbs were twisted branches, jointed in all the wrong places. And its head was the skull of a stag, bleached white, but covered in moss. Antlers rose from the skull, branching out like a crown of thorns. And in the hollow sockets of the bone, there were no eyes. Just a deep, bioluminescent green glow. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, waiting. I stepped back, terrified, and knocked a vase off the hallway table. Smash! The stag's head snapped toward the sound instantly. The movement was jerky, unnatural, like a stop-motion puppet. It let out a sound. It wasn't a roar. It was the sound of a tree splitting in a storm. A high-pitched wooden scream. Crack. Then it started to move. It didn't run. It lurched. It covered the ground with terrifying speed, its wooden limbs stabbing into the earth. I slammed the back door and threw the deadbolt. I dragged the heavy oak kitchen table across the floor and jammed it against the door. Thud. The whole house shook. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Thud. The wood of the door began to splinter. I could hear it outside. A wet, shuffling sound, accompanied by the creaking of timber. I ran to the living room. The windows. I hadn't boarded the windows. I saw a branch, no, a hand, smash through the living room glass. It was long, spindly, and tipped with thorns. It flailed blindly, knocking over the lamp, clawing at the curtains. I grabbed my car keys from the hook. The front door. I had to get to the car. I sprinted for the front door, but as I reached for the handle, I stopped. Underneath the door, roots were coming in. Thin, white, thread-like roots were forcing their way under the weather strip, writhing across the hallway floor like worms. They were growing fast, seeking purchase on the rug. No, 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 I whimpered. I ripped the door open. The creature was already rounding the corner of the house. It was massive up close. The smell hit me, rotting leaves and old blood. It lunged at me, a wooden claw swiping through the air. I ducked. The claw caught the shoulder of my jacket, tearing through the heavy wool and slicing my skin. It felt like being cut with a rusty saw blade. I scrambled across the gravel driveway. The pain was blinding, but the fear was worse. I fumbled with the key fob. Beep. The car unlocked. I threw myself into the driver's seat. The creature was blocking the driveway exit. It stood there, heaving, its wooden chest expanding and contracting. The green light in its eye sockets flared brighter. It raised its arms, and I swear, the trees on either side of the driveway bent down to join it. The canopy lowered, trying to block me in. I slammed the car into reverse. I didn't go for the driveway. I went straight back, through the garden fence, smashing through the trellis, spinning the wheel in the mud. I floored it across the neighbor's field, suspension screaming, bouncing over the rough earth. I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The creature wasn't following me. It was standing by the cottage. And the cottage was disappearing. The ivy, the roots, the branches, they were surging over the stone, swallowing the house whole in a matter of seconds. I drove until the petrol light came on. I ended up in a service station on the M4, shivering, bleeding into my shirt. I told the doctors I'd been attacked by a wild dog while hiking. They stitched me up, gave me a tetanus shot, and looked at me with pity. They didn't ask about the splinters they pulled out of the wound. Tiny shards of ancient, blackened oak. I never went back for my things. I hired a clearance firm to go get them a month later. They called me from the site. "Profound apologies, sir," the man said, "but we can't find the address." "What do you mean?" I asked, gripping the phone. "The GPS took us to the location," he said, "but there's no house here, just woods. Looks like there used to be a foundation maybe 50 years ago, but it's all overgrown. Trees growing right through the middle of where the living room should be." I hung up. I live in Manchester now. Top floor of a concrete tower block. Nothing green for miles. But the curse of Blackwood isn't geographical. It's a mark. The scar on my shoulder never fully healed. It's raised, jagged, and hard to the touch. Sometimes when it rains, it aches. And lately, I've noticed something about the apartment. In the bathroom, in the grout between the tiles, moss is starting to grow. I scrub it away with bleach, but it comes back overnight. Thick, dark green moss. And last night, I woke up because I heard a sound. Not from outside, from inside the walls. Creak, like a heavy branch settling in the wind. The forest is patient. It grows slowly, but it always grows. And I think it's finally found its way to me.